Hello, Brendan. Just sorting out my seating here. So, how's life in the north?
Well, you might notice, Ollie, I've got a different setting this week. The small bit of the setting that you can see, I thought I'd change my camera settings, but I have hasn't applied for this particular broadcast. But after all the talking, Ollie, I've done about my barrios populares, people might have thought that I've actually lived in them, but I hadn't until now. So as of last Sunday, I am now. Some people are upwardly mobile, Ollie. I'm downwardly mobile. I've gone from a strato cuatro to a strato dos. But no, I'm enjoying it so far. So I'm here in my new settings in Barrio Santandercito. I just hope, fingers crossed, that the internet stays stable, because when we were doing our little test run yesterday, we had a few problems, technical difficulties, but hopefully it stays steady. And how are things down your side of the city, Ollie?
A little bit more exciting than one had planned for. Managed to watch a dog attack on my second dog walk today. Another lady, her two dogs attacked some random guy in the park. I mean, to be honest, it's a thing that I've thought I'm going to see a number of times, so it's, I guess, in no way is it a total shock. But again, it just really frustrates me as a dog owner. It really frustrates me to see people not using dog leashes correctly and giving the rest of us a bad name.
Okay, well, we're probably going to be talking about dog walking and other such things shortly when we talk about new restrictions for the weekend. But I guess we'll crack on about what we have coming up, Ollie. And do you know what edition this is, Mr. Pritchard, of the show?
50? No, it can't be that high. 20?
We're on number 30, and I'm still waiting for my first paycheck. I'm sure it's in the post. But, yeah. I guess I've moved place so often in the last year that it's difficult. But yes, this is show number 30, guys, and coming up on Bogotá Nights, Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show, we're fixing our focus on that screen in the corner, or hanging on the wall as it tends to be these days. Yes, it's all about Colombian TV. From comical overacting in the popular telenovelas, or soap operas if you will, to slapstick comedy shows that are ripe for being the butt of the joke themselves. From live football coverage devoid of any studio analysis to dance-charged mid-morning shows, Colombian TV tends to fascinate and frustrate in equal measure. For Colombians watching, we want to know what is essential viewing for you when it comes to home-produced TV here, and what do you wish had never been aired. Foreign viewers, in today's streaming and YouTube-dominated world, do you even engage with Colombian TV? Perhaps some of you, like me, starred, very much in inverted commas, in telenovelas here. Send us your opinions and memories right now using the live comment facility, and your messages will appear on the screen. Or if you're watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing, or via tweet, the handle being @BogotáPost, of course, everybody's favorite English language newspaper in Colombia, and the hashtag Bogotá Nights. That's to come in the second half of the show, but first it's our news review. Many Colombians surely breathed a sigh of relief with the announcement that coffee and sugar, amongst other things, won't be subject to VAT, as had been suggested in proposed tax reforms. We'll talk about that shortly. To start with, though, Ollie, it's a case of lockdown Mark 5 or whatever it is from this weekend. Not surprising, but from what I can see, people are getting a little tired of this in, out, do the hokey pokey and shake it all about approach. What's in store for us with these latest restrictions?
Well, we don't really know, Brendan, because in terms of, we know what's on paper. What we really don't know, the big unanswered question is always the same. How is it going to be applied? How is it going to be executed? And that's going to be a big thing, I think. It's really weird to see this idea that the weekend restriction goes from midnight on Friday through well, midnight on Saturday, so like midnight between Friday and Saturday, to early morning Tuesday, which seems to me very, very odd. I mean, if you're worried about people spreading it in social situations, surely giving them a Friday night, it seems to me odd that you can go out on a Friday night, but you can't go out on a Saturday night. I'm not sure that I follow the logic on that one. Pico y Cédula, of course, is already operational. So that's you should be noticing that from now. It does seem semi-optional. We've had a few reports around the city saying that they've been to various places which have just not been applying Pico y Cédula. And a real step up from, no one ever expects a small local tienda to apply Pico y Cédula, but it seems to be that a couple of people have reported being in banks, things like that, and you would expect them to apply it in normal situations. So worth keeping an eye on. And I'd love to know if anybody out there, if you've got any reports on how much Pico y Cédula is being applied where you live. I'd love to know. I'd love to find out.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Ollie, just from my own side up here, I went into a Justo y Bueno the other day when Pico y Cédula was meant to be in force, and they just let me in. But on the same day I went into an ARA, it was my day, and they did check me there. So as you said, it's kind of seems to be left up to the places. One slight difference from the January-December Pico y Cédula is that in the Centro Comercials, or certainly here in Centro Comercial Santa Fe up the far north, they let you in because isn't that the case that restaurants are still allowed to serve? So obviously if you want to access the restaurant, so it's up to the individual locale shops in the Centro Comercial to do the checking. For example, I went into Centro Comercial Santa Fe and they let me in, but then I wanted to go into Dollar City. I'm still trying to furnish this new place that I'm in with very cheap furnishings. And of course they checked me there. But yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, the kind of, to use an American word, insanity with a lot of this, or it doesn't make any sense. Like, so Friday night, people can go out and enjoy their end of week celebrations or whatever they want to do. But then come Monday, everybody's in the house. And the other side of it, Ollie, and we spoke about this privately, but it seems like the comfortable classes, as I like to call them, or perhaps the virtue signalers, could go away last weekend on their Holy Week, Semana Santa break, with very few restrictions, if none really. And the hard-pressed lower classes, I'm generalizing here, of course, it's not as black and white as that, but they've had to work through this, so they have to suffer it. So if you got away last weekend, at least you can kind of go, I got away, I'll put up with a couple of weeks of lockdown now because I've recharged the batteries. So it's again, like a lot of these things, they tend to hit the same people over and over again, and other people kind of get away scot-free and then endorse the measures saying, oh, we have to do them.
Yeah, look, this is the thing that particularly irritates me. I don't mind necessarily people going away traveling. I mean, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, and I don't think it makes those people awful people necessarily. What I really object to is people that I know have been out gallivanting around, then coming back this week and saying, oh, because of COVIDiots, we all have to be locked down again. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, but you were away in your tienda, last week. So, you can't have your cake and eat it. I absolutely sympathize with people who felt they just needed to get away. I'm not judging people for that. I'd like to see less of the hypocrisy. And as you say, there's definitely a class element to this, and we're going to be running an article tomorrow on that. Just to come back to the actual restriction measures, though, Brendan, I think what's different this time compared to recent lockdowns is that we've got what they're calling plan cadena, to put literally a ring around the city. So leaving Bogotá won't be that easy. We're seeing various numbers reported, but it's looking like a few hundred police and military being stuck on the peajes to make sure that people have good reasons to be leaving or entering the city. So it'll be interesting to see how strictly that's applied. Of course, in recent lockdowns, I'm thinking January, I'm thinking towards the end of the year, those lockdowns saw people going off to illicit parties just over the border in Cundinamarca. If the rules hide this time, it'll be interesting to see if those still continue, if they simply bribe the police, or if it really does get shut down.
Yeah, I get the vibe, and I think I've said this before, and it hasn't materialized, but there does seem to be a vibe that there's going to be a tougher nature to this, that they will be enforcing, like that if you are out, for example, you were talking about dogs and dog walking and stuff like that, that one of the nonsensical rules again is that you can walk your dog for only 20 minutes, but you can run or take exercise for an hour. So your dog, which as far as we know cannot pass on coronavirus, has to get back in after 20 minutes. But you can continue on for another 40 minutes, which makes things very complicated. And again, the nonsensical nature of this. Look, I understand they don't want loads of people out in the street at the same time. But, I mean, if Brendan Corrigan or Ollie Pritchard decide to go for a walk on their own, maintaining a physical distance from everybody else, what harm is it if I'm out for 5 hours in, hopefully, the sunshine, if it's not raining, and getting vitamin D, which is has been proven to be...
There's not much logic to a lot of this, is there? Yeah, as you say, the whole dog walking thing, it does seem nonsensical, and it's not been applied at any stage. Going through various rounds of lockdown in the last year and a bit, and at none of those stages has it ever really been applied, this idea about dogs for 20 minutes. So yeah, let's see what happens. As you say, we seem to be saying this all the time in some weird sort of Mobius loop. That, you know, every time we think it's going to be a little bit heavier, we think, oh, it's really going to be enforced this time, and then it never really is. So, you know, let's see.
Yeah, I guess it's a wait and see. And again, as you mentioned, Ollie, to people watching, how has it been so far with the Piccoli Sedila? What are your own kind of feelings heading into this weekend? Will you be staying fully inside and maybe just getting out for your 1 hour? Or at this stage of it, are you tired, fatigued by the measures, and you're just kind of play it by ear and do whatever you think is right? Well, we should see. I guess the police might determine that, but so far in all of these lockdowns, the police have kind of had a very light touch approach. But do get in touch with us. And Alexandra, I know you missed us last week, but there is no show when there's a festivo, we've been told by the powers that be here at Final Prensa. So she was in touch with us last week going, she missed the show, so good that you're tuning in, and you're mentioning that you don't have a TV. We are going to be talking about Colombian TV, the good, the bad, and the very ugly of Colombian TV just after 9:30. And just to let you know that neither Ollie nor myself have a TV either, but we've watched plenty of it. Anyway, we'll continue on with the news review, and as I mentioned in the introduction, Ollie, there was all this talk. It happens every year, every 6 months. The tax reform. It's like it's been a topic of debate since I've been in this country. Ridiculous. But anyway, there was talk about including some of the staples, coffee and sugar for one. Who puts sugar in their coffee? I don't know, but pretty much every Colombian does. Including these on the VAT list, but that's not going to happen now, so I'm sure everybody's happy. But all this talk about reform as well, Ali, nothing happens, but we need more money, the government needs more money, works need to be completed, blah, blah, blah. Where are they going to get it from if they don't actually do any goddamn reform?
Yeah, I mean, well, personally, I mean, you know, I think I've made this clear on a number of occasions. I'd personally like to completely destroy the taxation system in Colombia, pull IVA in general down much, much, much lower, and increase massively income taxes. Income taxes are far too low in Colombia. It amazes me when I hear most frequently, obviously, it's my colleagues who are talking about their taxation level. It's absolutely berserk, Brendan. I mean, I pay so little as a percentage of my income. It's frankly ludicrous. And of course, that's why the police are underpaid and therefore corrupt. That's why infrastructure doesn't exist, things like that. I would like to see it all ripped up. I just paid my predial on which is like my council tax, and I quite happily paid the optional extra that the alcaldia asks for, which was brought in originally by Antonis Mokas. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm happy to pay a little bit of extra tax. And by the way, I do know that some of the extra tax that I pay will be robbed and go into the pockets of, corrupt and illicit politicians, and that's fine. I know that, but I'd rather that they took 40% of a little bit extra than they took 100% of nothing. So, in that respect, given that we can't eliminate corruption, I would at least like us to have, the biggest number possible to work with. And also, let's not kid ourselves. There aren't really any governmental systems or any tax systems that manage to function without corruption. But anyway, off the soapbox.
I disagree with you. And I'm guessing Alexandra, she's talking about Uribe's two sons, Geronimo and Tomas, meeting with President Duque. Now, I'm not sure whether discussing taxes, Alexandra seems to suggest.
Look, this. But again, this is where people like, this is where the right wing of Colombia managed to lead all their critics on a merry dance. This insignificance of looking at the tiny little things. You just go, oh, Uribe's doing something bad. Okay, yeah, sure, he is, absolutely. But there are massive structural problems here. He is a symptom at best. He's not the cause. And there are some seriously massive problems in the Colombian economy in general, but specifically in the taxation system. And whether Uribe exists or doesn't exist, he's a flea. That's it. He's a flea on a big dog of problems.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, one thing I will say, to give my own old podcast a plug, but last year I had a very interesting interview with the Los Andes economist Leopoldo Ferguson. That's Ferguson with two S's. And he's got some very interesting ideas on tax reform, very liberal ideas as well. Worth checking that out if you search Wrong Ways, Colombia Cast and Leopoldo Ferguson podcast. You should find that, and you'll get some interesting perspectives there. Now, of course, Ollie, you talked about you're happy to pay your taxes and pay more because, well, the thinking being that if you pay more, at least some of it will go towards good causes. One of those good causes being the Ingreso Solidario, and talk that this emergency income, basically, for those in the lower strata from 3 down, I believe, to help during the pandemic, sums around 300,000 pesos a month, if I'm not mistaken, talks that this could become a regular measure and something that I'm sure you'd agree with. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, let's not all start celebrating quite yet. I mean, it's being proposed, by the Ministry of Hacienda, Ministry of the Treasury, basically. It's being proposed as possibly an avenue to go down. But even that, I would say, in of itself, that's actually a huge step forward. I mean, let's not forget, the Programa Ingreso Solidario, it's a pretty well-run scheme. Now, sure, no one's going to say it's perfect, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of something being rushed out quickly, it's generally been effective and it's generally been efficient. And it's money that's arrived in pretty much the right place. So that's really, I think, a positive thing of the pandemic. And if we're looking at concreting that into future spending plans, I think that's potentially an incredibly positive thing. Of course, entirely possible that it's just going to get sunk and lost and forgotten about. So let's not start celebrating quite yet.
Yeah, well, I guess it's close to the grand debate that's going on across the higher income nations of a universal basic income as technology and motorized technology and things like that take over from manual labor. And we've got a lot of people with, well, what do we do with them in a sense, or what do they do to make a living? So yeah, it could be linked to that. Now, the one thing I don't know, and you might know this, Ollie, or people watching, listening might know, is it per household or per person? I meant to ask a couple of the lads in the barrio here that just rent a room. Have they got the famous text message from either Claudia Lopez or Ivan Duque handing them money? It's like it comes from their own pocket. I'm not sure on that. Is it per household or per individual?
I really don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, so we'll leave that one hanging. Is there anyone listening?
Yeah, and it would also...
Go on, sorry.
It would also whether those rooms are being let legally or cash in hand sublet. That would probably play into that as well, I suppose.
I should move swiftly on, so we're talking about cash in hand renting rooms. But yeah, if anybody knows, and is anybody tuning in, have they received any of these payments? We'd like to know about that. Well, so those are the two kind of financial, economic moves. And of course, next year, Ollie, we are due a presidential election, and we have an early declared runner. Who is that?
A second one. We've already got. What's her name? Is already in the race.
Francia.
No. Angela Maria Robledo announced she's running as a pre-candidate. And this week we also had Francia Marquez is throwing her hat into the ring. I suspect she's going to be very much like Umberto de la Calle in the very moral. Hello, little cat. Very moral, a wonderful human being. I agree with her politically much more than I would with somebody like De La Calle, but fundamentally, I mean, it's she stands very little chance.
Yeah, and of course, she's announced that she's going to run, but we don't know kind of what platform, on what party. As you mentioned, you can talk about like her character and her background and all that kind of stuff, but is she going to go in as an independent or what? We just don't know. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to run first of all, and then I'll make up my mind.
Oh, well, I mean, let's not. I mean, to be fair, most candidates in Colombian presidential elections are effectively independents anyway. I mean, the only real one is whoever stands for Uribe's party, the Centro Democrático. Apart from that, I mean, the Green Party seems to have no actual sort of ideology behind it. It just seems to be whoever happens to be running under their banner, people vote for. But yeah, I find it very strange. I mean, of course, coming from England, I'm used to having the big Labour machine, the big Conservative machine, the big Liberal Democrat, well, the moderately big Liberal Democrat machine, and even our Green Party have very clearly defined policies, ideological policies. So the detail might change a little bit depending on this specific circumstance, but fundamentally, they're, every election they're offering the same thing. Whereas I don't really think that's true in Colombia. And then, of course, you have all these, these parties jumping out of nowhere, whether that's things like Cambio Radical or dissenters, all of these.
Yeah, I guess you could say simmering perhaps under the surface after 150 years or whatever of duopoly of liberalism and conservatism. As soon as the door flung open, then everybody wanted to kind of set up some sort of a party, a mix and match of this, that, and the other.
Actually, I must say, I don't think it's a terrible thing at all. I mean, actually, if you're going to have a presidential system, I quite like the idea that the presidential candidates actually, as the American Constitution originally envisaged, that there should be no place for parties. I don't think that's a terrible thing at all. Have the parties in the Senate, have the president as a neutral person separate from it. I don't think that's a terrible idea at all.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either, Ollie. But Francia Marquez, anyway, you mentioned Humberto de la Calle. I will say I did, for what it's worth, and not an awful lot, I endorsed Humberto de la Calle in the last election. I kind of thought he might be a good stopgap president. But Francia Marquez's chances as an Afro-Colombiana, slim and none. Anyway, but we wish her the best of luck. By the way, thanks, Alexandra, just to let us know that the Ingreso Solidario is based on the CISBEN health system, so that's how they throw out the money for that. Okay, so one other thing, Ollie, because it's been an ongoing discussion since really the turn of the year, if not earlier, that security in Bogotá has taken a turn for the worse, and we saw. Well, I guess there's two things here. If you're in particular neighborhoods of Bogotá, you probably think, well, it's the same. It's always been this way. But in the leafier suburbs, if I can call them that, they might be going, but it's descending into chaos. And we had an incident at a Starbucks of all places this week.
Yeah, right in the Usaken heartlands, 116 with Septima. Yeah, I mean, like you say, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, we forget sometimes, I think, just how violent Bogotá is. Remember, we have 3 homicides a day still, but it's not something you're used to seeing in, affluent parts of Usaken, Usaken Central, Santa Barbara. Now, nobody was killed in this attack, but still, a lot of people turning up on motorbikes, armed, forcing people to hand over wallets, phones, computers and like. I'm always surprised, Brendan, that this sort of thing doesn't happen more often. I'm constantly being told it's full of poor and desperate people. I'm constantly being told that Colombia is very insecure. And yet instances like this are relatively rare, relatively uncommon. It is interesting that we've had an event in Rosales a couple of weeks ago. We've had an event right in the middle of Santa Barbara this week. We've had shootings in the center. Now, okay, you wouldn't say the center is perhaps the richest part of Colombia, but it's still, in terms of statements, it's still fairly big.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, that like how common it is, because this was relatively petty crime in the Starbucks incident, and it made headline news. Whereas, I'm guessing if this thing happened in Caracas, well, probably a bad example to use, but would it make the news anyway? And
yes.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, let me be clear here, because Alexandra's here commenting that we're not informed about it. No, we absolutely are informed about it when it happens in, the richer parts of the city. When it's happening in Strata 5, Strata 6, we do hear about it because, instantly the people who manage the news, the gatekeepers, communication systems, that's very much in their neck of the woods. So they say, oh, no, we've got to report on this. What I mean is, it's really interesting, as you say, Brendan, I think, here. Yeah, this type of thing happens relatively regularly in other parts of the city. It's interesting that it's spreading now into the more affluent areas, which historically have managed to avoid things like this, largely.
Yeah, and I don't want to belittle the incident, because I know what it's like to have things stolen from you, and I've had plenty of times it's happened to me in this city. But I have had some Colombians kind of respond when I've vented anger on social media, when I've had a mobile phone stolen or whatever, even up to a laptop, which happened a couple of years ago or 3 years ago. It's like, oh, dando papaya, silly boy. It's like, oh, well, now, so are you giving papaya in Starbucks these days? Like, these things happen. It's frustrating. Doesn't matter where they happen. It's goddamn annoying wherever it happens. And I hate how the victim.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what we're highlighting here, though, is the fact that I've seen things like this happen on the 45 near to where I live. I've heard about them happening all over the city, never, right next to Centro Comercial Santa Barbara. That's a different kettle of fish. I think we can all understand that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, we're about to move on to our main topic. We've got a quick mention, because there is a Colombian, and I know this is your favorite sport, Ollie, so I want to mention it. A Colombian competing on the world stage, and a Rolo as well, and this is Bogotá Nights. Sebastian Munoz. He's at the Augusta Masters, the golf, the first major of the year. And not too bad in his first round, 2 over, but he's 9 shots off the lead. Your compatriot, Ollie, Justin Rose, on 7 under. But we'll keep an eye on Sebastian.
My compatriot.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you've played a few rounds of golf with him, Ollie. Go on, admit it.
Is he my compatriot or your compatriot? I'm not sure which side of the road he's on.
No. You're on about Rory McIlroy. Justin Rose is very much.
Oh, sorry.
Justin Rose
properly English. No. Yeah, okay.
No, Rory McIlroy had a worse round than Sebastian Munoz. Rory McIlroy's back on 4 over. Sebastian Munoz is on 2.
Yeah, and to be fair, a Rory McIlroy could go either way, but a Justin Rose is definitely on the English side of that, I'm sure.
Oh, indeed. There's no red hand or white hand as it is in his St. George's cross flag. Anyway, our big topic, guys, Colombian TV, and there's a lot to talk about here. Now, Ollie, I know normally on a Thursday night you would be glued to the telenovelas, but since we've started this program all of 32 weeks ago now, or 33, because we missed 3 weeks for holiday reasons, you've had to devote yourself to Bogotá Nights. But when we talk about Colombian TV, I guess telenovelas are the first thing that kind of springs to mind for me, because I've actually been an extra and more. I've been a super extra in some of these things. But I'm always kind of intrigued by what I would class the overacting in telenovelas. But then you kind of look, you see normal, especially Colombianas, women, and the kind of dramatic facial expressions and the gestures that they make. And you're like, well, actually, they're not overacting. This is how they behave.
Yeah, no, it could be. I mean, art does, and also let's not kid ourselves. I know it's kind of de rigueur to criticise the overacting, but it's. I mean, the average resident of Albert Square in a British soap, is going to get married and divorced 7 or 8 times in their life, as well as half their family be murdered in various events. So it's kind of. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? But yeah, I know what you mean. I do watch some, I mean, to be honest, I like telenovelas in Latin America. I've got to say, I think they're interesting. I think they tell us something interesting about the society, that the way they appreciate that schlocky glitz and that kind of cheesy, over dramatic thing. I think that tells us, if you look at a British soap, it's unrelentingly miserable, but not in a fun way. Colombian ones always seem like kind of camp and fun, whereas in England, it's just sheer misery for everybody, except in the Archers.
Well, there have been a few kind of more hard-hitting, I don't know, do you put them under the telenovela bracket, but a couple of them that I've, again, starred in. I was thinking that maybe the song Video Killed the Radio Star was going to be applicable to me at the beginning of my stay here in Colombia, but unfortunately I haven't made it as a television star here, a telenovela star. But the likes of El Capo, and Ya Te Espero, which were, well, I won't say darker, but as far as I'm concerned, well produced, kind of decent acting, decent storylines to them, not kind of superficial stuff. I thought they were well made. Contrasted to it was El Comandante, I think, that was on RCN, and the guy who played Hugo Chavez, was a biography of Hugo Chavez. Like, he was either told, look, just make out Hugo Chavez to be the stupidest, dumbest looking guy that you can, or he just completely got the character wrong. Well, I won't say wrong, but it was like a comedy, and I don't think it was meant to be a comedy. I don't know. Did you ever see that El Comandante?
I didn't, but I did look up the picture of the actor, and I must say, Hugo Chavez is one of those people that's, I think, quite distinctive looking. I've got a friend back in London who looks a bit like Hugo Chavez, but he looks absolutely nothing like the guy. Like you say, he looks like a low-rent Rambo in the one you're talking about. I mean, of course, though, if we're talking about actors resembling who they're meant to look at, Mas El Patron de Mal. I don't know the name of the actor. He's apparently quite famous, but he really is the spitting image of Escobar. I mean, that was fantastic casting.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was. I never watched the actual show itself because, of course, that was the forerunner then to Narcos. Would I be correct in saying that Narcos then kind of followed that? And obviously, Narcos shot to international acclaim. And again, to give myself a little plug, I did have a 10-second moment of fame in that I was answering the phone to none other than Pablo Escobar at the German embassy here in Bogota saying, "Aló, Embajada Alemana." So that was quite surreal with Narcos. But Narcos, yeah, obviously in Netflix, more an international thing. But yeah, the Escobar one that I think it was Caracol, El Patron de Mal. Like, by all accounts, that got good reviews as well. So I'm not sure anyone, well, Alexandra, who's effectively now our third presenter on this show, I'm not sure she checked out any of those. Of course, she mentions the fact that... Go on, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that, those shows are very controversial. A lot of people think they should never, ever be shown. But I mean, of all the things I've seen on TV here, I'd say they're the most enjoyable. I only watched a couple of episodes of El Patron de Mal. Bloque de Busqueda I thought was okay. Distrito Salvaje, I've been, massive comedy awards, but I thought it was very, very, very watchable. Sorry, not comedy awards, television awards. But I thought it was. I thought it was a very watchable show, especially under the constrictions they have. Let's not kid ourselves. A lot of these, you look at something like Narcos, they've funded up to the absolute gills, not just in terms of what they can afford to put in front of the camera, but also what they can do in sort of post-production and the like. I think a lot of the Colombian narco shows acquit themselves much better. And of course, the critical thing is have a much better understanding of local situations. No. So I've got the...
Yeah, I was just going to say though, Wally, because it's an interesting point. You took El Capo, El Patron de Mal obviously was based on Escobar, but El Capo was fictional. Sin Tetel Si Hay Paraíso or No Hay Paraíso. There was, I think, two versions.
No Hay Paraíso.
And that's another one that I starred in with actually Spanish text. I did well there alongside the star. I think it's Camila Villalobos or something. That was one of my highlights in telenovela acting. But they portray obviously this narco, beautiful women image of Colombia that a lot of Colombians are trying to say there's more to this country than just that. But yet their own productions focus on it so much. So we get into trouble as foreigners when we highlight all of this, but they highlight it themselves, and it sells, obviously.
Well, it's the usual story, isn't it, Brendan? If a foreigner does it, we're not happy, but we're allowed to do it ourselves. And I do have some sympathy with that. As I said, the locally produced ones generally tend to be sort of much more sympathetic to the situation, whereas you could accuse maybe the American series of being a bit more sensationalist.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Just something on a lighter note as well that's now being rerun on Caracol because obviously with the pandemic, a lot of productions aren't filming or have had restricted access. It's El Escamoso, Pedro El Escamoso, and there's a famous dance. If anybody doesn't know this, but go on YouTube and search El Pirulino, the dance. It's it's kind of catchy, to be honest. I can imagine Ollie giving it a go. It's El Perelino dance. Check it out. It's funny. But El Escamoso, he's kind of your typical looking, long curly-haired Colombian. But I've really no idea what the show is about. But I know it's very popular. People are glued, especially here. My neighbors, as they are now, with my friends here in the barrio, like every evening they watch this. Pedro El Escamoso, the reruns of it. I think it might be 20 years old now at this stage. But that's kind of moving into a comedy direction. And as I mentioned in the introduction, Ollie, comedy here, for our kind of British, Irish humour, we tend to find it a little bit slapstick, or as you said yesterday, reductive in the way it's delivered.
Oh, wait. Because we have those shows in England as well. I think what's interesting about Colombian comedy is there's not really an outlet, I think, for kind of alternative humorists, if you see what I mean. So even if you take people like Juan Piece, I mean, I think he's quite funny, but again, it's quite a limited character. It's quite it's quite direct. It's not particularly sophisticated comedy. There were a few. There's that show from there's Jaime Garzón, obviously, but it's hard to imagine a show like that being commissioned, in the modern climate. The modern media climate of Colombia, you can't really see that. Maybe on Netflix or something like that, but local Netflix. But yeah, I think that would be something you can't imagine coming back, and I think that's quite sad. Again, like I say, coming from England, where we've got the BBC to kind of, which is funded to say, hey, no one's going to watch this, but the people that are going to watch it are going to really like it, so it's worth throwing public money at, which I think is quite an important thing.
Yeah. By the way, the connection was a little bit dodgy for me there, Ollie, so I got every second word, but I think I got the gist of it.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, are you a fan of Hassam? And there's another guy as well, which I can't remember his name, but they're kind of in the same boat in terms of, again, kind of dressing like a clown. You've got Sábados Felices on Caracol TV. Again, not something that I would tend to sit down and watch with a glass of wine if I had one. Not my kind of comedy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I've got to be honest, not a massive fan of English television, or particularly of Irish television, from what little I know of it. I mean, I'd like to make that clear that I see equally as ridiculous things back home as I do out here. So, but yeah, I know what you mean. Watching those type of daytime shows just absolutely hurts my eyes. Like when I watch something like, can you remember when El Precio Es Correcto used to be on in every panaderia all the time? And I just found it painful to look at. There's so much brightness coming out of the television, like all these primary colors. It's like a kindergarten's nightmare. And yeah, I found that sort of show really difficult to deal with, and it feels to me like there's a lot of that kind of show. You know what I'd like to see is something like Noticias Uno, but just like rolling all the time. I'd like to have that on the background, in a panaderia, or in a tienda, rather than a kind of really aggressively loud and bright show. Desafío, that's another one that always gets. I never know you must have seen this in the background of things. Desafío. I mean, I get the general idea of it, but it just seems to it looks like some kind of existentialist play. That there's just, two randomly defined teams on a small sort of bit of gym equipment on a beach in the middle of competing in a task that ultimately seems pointless and apparently has no reward. they never seem to win anything in it. I never see any kind of, and then the show just seems to end. It just seems to stop. It doesn't. There's no end. There's no final denouement. There's no, oh well, this team won today and they're 7 points ahead in the series or any of that. It just stops and the next, adverts start, and I don't know what's going on in that show. If anyone can enlighten me, I probably still won't care. But
I was going to say,
but it is bizarre.
You've reminded me. It's probably the reality TV version of that series that went on for ages and then didn't have any kind of satisfactory conclusion. Lost. Now, I never watched it, but I heard people kind of going, it started off with all this great fanfare, and it was like, oh, what's it all about? And it's like the end of the world, blah, 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 whatever. And then it kind of just petered out by all accounts with no real ending. It's like the writers had a great idea at the start, but they'd no idea how to finish it. So it just kept kind of going on and on and on until it just eventually died. But you kind of jumped over there from live shows and reality shows. I want to mention one quick thing about the mid-morning shows, because an Irish friend of mine who's been here years, but I remember we used to meet for coffees after our morning classes, and invariably the Caracol mid-morning show would be on. I think it's Dia. And when they were in studio, of course, now with the pandemic, they're all doing it from home. But it would always have dancing, and this used to really annoy my friend. He just hates dancing in general. Why do they have to dance on this goddamn show? It just used to always fascinate me how angry he got watching them dance around. I mean, hey, it's good exercise, and I'm sure maybe a few housewives or empleados who have it on, or kind of helps them get through that mid-morning slump.
Well, and also, it's Colombia. What do you expect? I mean, Colombians like dancing. Well, it would seem bizarre if they didn't dance. I mean, I don't want my newsreaders to be dancing necessarily, but yeah, if you're on a kind of morning magazine show, it would seem to me utterly bizarre if they weren't dancing.
Of course. Now, when we're on about the kind of slapstick comedy as well, I know I'm kind of jumping back myself here, but one thing that if people aren't that familiar are kind of going, what do you mean? Of course, the representation of that is seen in The Simpsons with Mr. Bumblebee Man, and he's based on, I'm guessing, El Chavo. El Chavo, what's his name? Not his name. Which, of course, is Mexican.
Oh, El Chavo de Ocho, Solidario.
Mexican, but you would always have it on TV here until I think there was a copyright issue, and now it's no longer on Saturday mornings as it used to be on Caracol, and I think even RCN, on both of them. And, of course, that's just, you'd have, in my local panaderia where all the bus drivers go, they'd be just glued to this, reruns of the same thing over and over again, but hugely, hugely popular.
Oh, enormous. I mean, do you remember his funeral? I mean, it was broadcast on television, live, and people stopped work to pay respects. I mean, yeah, I can't think of any comedy show, apart from The Simpsons, which you mentioned, that's had such a massive influence over centuries. I really can't.
Yeah, I guess Colombians must be missing it now. I'm sure it's probably on some of the other networks, maybe channels that you have to pay for or whatever. I'm not sure. I want to move on because I know we're moving into the final 10 minutes because we were talking about differences and we haven't mentioned sports yet. We'll get to that in a second. But one thing in a chat show thing, now correct me if I'm wrong, Alexandra, if you're still watching, weekend chat shows, because I grew up in Ireland with Friday night and then Saturday night. You had two kind of big flagship chat shows that pretty much, everyone talked about it, and a lot of the time they became agenda setters for the following week. They might interview some person with something controversial to say or had a big panel discussion about X, Y, or Z. But here, I don't think there are any kind of decent chat shows in the vein of in the UK. You'd be familiar with Parkinson, or there was Terry Wogan and things like that. But they don't tend to have them here, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, or like those American shows, like the various late night shows that they have on various channels. Yeah, you're right. There doesn't seem to be a format that sort of, like you say, you have it in the morning, but you don't really have it in the evening or in the night.
Yeah. Like, so I just find that, yeah, kind of, but maybe there are, and we're not like, obviously we're kind of focused here on Caracol and RSN, but they are the biggest ones. I don't know, you've got the regional shows then, like City Noticias and things like that people might tune into, but generally it's the big ones are Caracol and RSN.
But like you say that when you're saying about it in terms of having like a sort of enter and an interview and that sort of thing. Another thing I find very interesting, certainly when I'm watching news, I mention this frequently to my students, is that there appears to be no real kind of hard interviewing at all. Like, it doesn't seem that a politician can never seems to get taken to task. I very much grew up on the idea of politicians having to defend themselves to television journalists, that they would have to stand up and say, okay, I'm defending this, whereas somebody like Jeremy Paxman lays into them and calls them an idiot. And I've never seen anything like that in Colombia.
Of course, we mentioned this in previous shows, though. Now, our favorite and the woman who owes me money, Vicky Davila. She's probably the closest that you get to that with her Semana, which is now effectively TV, but obviously it's on the social media. You don't get it on a channel. So she's hard hitting enough. She certainly makes plenty of enemies, anyway. Would you agree?
Yeah, we've talked about that before, haven't we? But what I mean is, you can't imagine the kind of robot. I mean, there are plenty of shows on British television that are genuinely unpleasant to watch because there's just outright hostility between the two people. I can't really remember ever having seen that in Colombia. Maybe once or twice. Twice, with Vicky, but not common thing.
To be honest, I nearly prefer the softly approach, though. Like, I tend to watch those kind of interviewers nowadays, and no, not that I'm putting myself in that bracket, but I'd like to think that that's the way I go. But like, I'm not always looking for conflict, because I think sometimes some interviewers can just go over the top. It's like, I am going to attack this man no matter what. And it can, as you say, come across very uncomfortable almost to watch it.
Oh no, it is uncomfortable, but also I think there is. Look, I don't want I don't want everybody to be doing that. But I would like to see somebody doing it at least. And actually, by the way, I think Colombia's trailblazing in this. I think. Duque, a very clever move from him to set up his own television show.
Oh,
absolutely, very clever. I mean, then you completely avoid the need for an interlocutor at all. It's basically free propaganda. I mean, devious and problematic, but also very, very clever.
Yeah, well, again, if the fourth estate has been taken out of the realm there, in fairness, and that would be my biggest problem with that. Alexandra telling us that she's only back in Colombia after 20 years. But then, Alexandra, you might understand the desire or to have these animation kind of from the 1980s or whatever on Caracol and RSN on Saturday mornings. There's kind of
Saturday mornings.
Brothers Grimm style fairy tale things in cartoon mode. They tend to have those on holiday.
Caballeros del Zodiaco.
Yeah. So you might remember those. Maybe there's a reason why they like to rerun those. And also Maria Carolina Mataron telling us about Joe Jose Gabriel, which I think an old guy. I think I may have seen some of those, but he's disappeared, has he? Or maybe he's dead. I'm not 100% sure. Hopefully he's not. But I've just consigned him to the grave. But they're the chat shows. But I do want to mention, we're talking about differences. and I again mentioned this at the start. Football, Ollie, like one thing, I'm an Irishman, and a lot of the time, specifically when I'm talking about football, soccer.
Oh, you never mention it.
Yeah, well, the favorite thing, yeah, I don't. How did you get? But the favorite thing for us is the analysis, the pre-match, post-match, and mid-match analysis, because a lot of the time our team plays rubbish anyway, so the analysis is more fun. But you've got these, former footballers, experts, expert analysis giving their opinion, and that's most people tune in more so for that than the football. But here in Colombia, when it's halftime in a game, they'll have about 10 ad breaks, and then they'll just do like a rerun of the highlights of the match, but with no real analysis whatsoever. It just doesn't seem to be something that people go for here.
Yeah, I find that utterly bizarre as well. Really bizarre. I just don't understand that at all. I know what you mean. In the middle of a match, and you just have the replays kind of come up with the minute, and then the replay, and just nothing behind it. Whereas I'm used to hearing Roy Keane saying, "Shown no desire there. He's an absolute disgrace." And the likes of Alan Hansen complaining about defending, etc., etc. So yeah, it's kind of it's kind of sad.
Yeah, but again, now of course they do have football shows, where they talk about it. There's what is that, El Balón Dividido or whatever, which is on.
Oh yes, no, that's the really interesting thing. That's what I really don't understand, because actually Colombia's full of good football analysis, just not in the game. And I wonder, actually, maybe there's something in that. Maybe it is a bit better to have a bit of time to reflect and give a sort of better analysis later, in the same way that the likes of Gary Neville or Jamie Carragher do on Monday Night Football in England.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point, but I'm a fan of the analysis as part of the coverage of the live football match. I think it works well, but doesn't go down well here. Alexandra clearly isn't a big football fan anyway. She doesn't like the way it takes over the news when there's a game on, and of course it does. But come on, practically everybody is talking about it when there is a big international game.
Oh yes, I think television has a real responsibility to do. I always think about television having two responsibilities. One is to manage niche interest, and the other is to give pleasure to the masses. And the masses like football. Give them football. I've never understood. I'd certainly much rather they showed football than, let's say, polo, which I'd imagine gets a disproportionate amount of funding in Colombia, or tennis, or any of those sports. Generally for rich people. Football's a working man's sport. The working people want to watch it on television. Let them watch it on television. What I would rather watch is let them watch it. Don't have an advert for pork popping up in the middle of the game. That irritates me. The adverts, and a lot of the time these adverts pop up like when there's like a goal chance, or like the ball. Yeah. Exactly, and then an ad for Sergio Arboleda, the university or something comes on. I was like, I don't want to hear about this. There's almost a goal. It is a bit silly. By the way, Alexandra, I'm with you on the rugby. I am a rugby fan, but of course we can't mention football without mentioning the ridiculously fast commentary. You really know you understand Spanish if you can understand the guy who's doing the commentary. Like a million words a second almost. It's madness. They used to clip on YouTube. I think they've taken it down, but you can get the two together and watch them. If you watch René Higuita's scorpion kick, because it was in Wembley, it's quite a big thing in England. A famous bit of commentary, and it's really interesting to see the commentaries back to back and just see quite how different they are in terms of exuberance.
Must check that out. One final thing on the differences I want to mention, Ollie. In Ireland, the most important thing of any news bulletin is the weather forecast. Even though
yes.
it always rains. But here they just kind of give fleeting coverage to weather. They might just stick up something for like 10 seconds going, this is going to be the temperature and the forecast for the next 5 days. But there's no real weather forecast, is there?
I mean, what would it be? It's a bit, and it'll be sunny a bit.
Yeah, I know. Still, they could make something out of it. I think they do in Mexico. Anyway, I think we've been told that's our lot. It is the hour mark. Ollie, a pleasure. I like your new setting, by the way, there. It's almost got something kind of Count Dracula-esque to it. Anyway, guys, good night. We'll talk to you next week.